system's rigged, man, it's time to break free. Eyes wide open, gotta see what I see. Standing on the front lines, fighting for the truth. Lift the veil of lies, it's time to be the proof. Take a stand, don't you back down. Raise your voice, let's shake the town. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking chains, yeah, we're ready for war. With the power of the people, we'll make them see a world of justice, united and free. United and free. United and free. Marching with a purpose, we're taking it higher. Fighting through the struggle, igniting the fire. No more silence, we'll make the noise loud. Together in this battle, standing strong and proud. Injustice fades when courage aligns. Rise up together, break the confines. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking chains, yeah, we're ready for war. With the power of the people, we'll make them see a world of justice, united and free. United and free. United and free. So rise up now.
All right, everybody, welcome to Justice is a Process, and we are here tonight to discuss the big news coming out of New York City right now, which is that Diddy, otherwise aka P. Diddy, aka Love, aka you name it, one of the most famous music moguls in the industry, one of the most powerful music moguls in the industry, has been indicted. And we have the indictment. We're going to go over the indictment. We're going to read it. We're going to discuss it. This was a case I was covering. I remember when Diddy got busted. And they did the raids back in March, and we talked heavily about this case. And I predicted that a lot of people thought an indictment was coming around the corner, and I said, hold your horses. It's going to take a while. And we're going to get into it. We're going to look at the indictment. We're going to read it over, and we're going to see what it means for Diddy. He's facing potentially the rest of his life in prison. Now, I know a little bit about what it means to be indicted from the federal government and to have someone facing the rest of their life in prison due to allegations from the federal government, because my father was under federal indictment. He faced indictment for drug conspiracy, and he was facing the rest of his life in prison. Now, he ended up doing 7 months. He did not end up going to prison for life, but it is a possibility in this case. Now, that is for the RICO charge, and it's important to note that a life sentence for a RICO charge normally needs to involve some sort of death or unaliving in order for that to be the sentence. You're not going to typically see life be given out or handed out for things that involve some of the elements that you're going to see here in this case, which is human trafficking, and in the sense that he was transporting sex workers, forced labor, things of that nature. Could we see 20 years in prison? Yes. But there's a big aspect we're going to talk about that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, which is what's really going on here. And that is what the government's really going after in this case. And that is, when they secure a conviction, they are going to be able to have Diddy forfeit his assets. So everything this man's worked for, the millions and billions in assets that he has, the way they've structured this indictment, it's going to allow them, if a conviction were to occur, to essentially confiscate his empire, take him to nothing, reset him, and put him at zero. Which, Many will say that there's lots at work here behind the scenes when someone of the level of Diddy is allowed to be indicted, is being currently held without bond, and things like that are normally not allowed to happen, which is why you see a lot of people right now reacting to this and very surprised about it. But the big thing here is not about the jail time. It's not about the prison time. It's about the forfeiture action that the federal government will be able to take. They will be able to take houses, his recording studio, anything that emanates from the enterprise, which the theory that the government, as you're going to see when we go over the indictment, anything that emanates from that enterprise, the federal government would be able to seek forfeiture of. And they included that in the indictment. You're going to see it. We're going to read it over. We're going to go over it. So a lot to unpack here. Diddy sits in prison as we talk right now. We're going to also hear from his attorney, who talks about what's going to happen tomorrow, because there's a very important hearing tomorrow at 3:30 in Manhattan, where they will actually go before the actual judge. It's very actually unusual in federal cases to not have a bond set. So what happened today was unusual with him being held without bond. And not only that, but most of the time in federal court, not only is bond set, but there's actually no money that's required to be put up. Normally, it's what's called a recognizance bond or a signature bond, where they will set an amount of money that if you don't show up, you will be responsible for, your family will be responsible for, assets could be taken and collected in the amount of. And they do this in 95% of the cases that are out there. It's normally unusual unless you have a case like R. Kelly, where there was witness intimidation and things of that nature, and that there was multiple other cases and he was already being held in another jurisdiction without bond, that you see no bond be implemented. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. But very interesting times. Very, very, very interesting times. So without further ado, I think we're getting to the indictment here. I'll get that set up. While I'm getting that set up, guys, if you're new to the channel, if you encounter this video, I am Steve. Channel's name is Justice is a Process. Background on the channel. What do? We watch. The goal of the channel is to bring the justice system to you and the process of justice to you. And we bring trials, cover trials all over the country. My father was probably the best criminal attorney you've never heard of. He was a criminal defense attorney in West Virginia, and he practiced law from 1973 as an attorney until 1996. After that, he was a criminal law consultant. He consulted with attorneys. He was involved in major cases all over the Eastern Seaboard, and had quite an interesting story, quite an interesting life, all the way up until the day he passed away. There's a lot to unpack with him, but because of being the son of a criminal defense attorney, one of the best criminal defense attorneys, I was around the law for my entire life. I've had a distinct interest in the law, but one of the things my dad imparted in me is the importance of watching, the importance that people watch, because he said things happen in darkness. Things happen when we don't watch. That's when the system doesn't work properly. And he used to always have a saying, justice works better when we watch. So out of that, as my dad was coming to the end of his life, we put together this project, which was supposed to involve him telling his story, having us watch trials together, giving him the opportunity to talk to people and teach people about the law, which he did his whole life. And unfortunately, before this whole thing got off the ground, he passed away. So I'm keeping it going. We're watching the justice system. And, to be a trial watcher, you only need to be you. because we can all be on a jury tomorrow, and there is no qualifications to be a juror except be a citizen of the United States. So we're all more well qualified to do this job and watch the criminal justice system, watch it unfold, explain what's going on, and make sure we're keeping the prosecutors, the police, the defense attorneys, the judges honest. And when they're not, we're going to be there to point it out. So get subscribed, hit that like button on this video so that it moves along the YouTube algorithm and help us grow the channel. We're 33,000 strong, heading to 34,000. So actually, I think we might be 34,000 strong, actually. But we're moving towards 35,000 subscribers. I appreciate each one of you guys. So become the next subscriber today and help us keep watching justice across the country. Anyways, with that said, I am going to pull up the indictment here. Now, it's the end of a long day, guys, so you're not going to have my voice reading this because I don't think I'd be able to get through that. So we're going to listen to it. I have already curated this with my AI software that we have that will read the indictment to us. So we're gonna read it. We're gonna stop it. We're gonna start it. We're gonna discuss it, and we're gonna get into what this means as you're reading through. Now, this, like I said, there's a lot here, so there's going to be a lot to discuss. But I think you're also going to find, if you've been following this case, you're going to find a lot that a lot of what is going to be said in this indictment is already been said. It was already brought out in the civil cases that have subsequently come before this. So let that sink in for a minute, that we have, in my opinion, we have the prosecuting attorney, the Southern District federal prosecutors, regurgitating tabloid fodder and turning it into a RICO case. It's quite interesting while also alarming. But anyways, we'll let the indictment speak for itself. This is what Diddy's facing. It's 3 charges. And for me, it's actually quite thin on details. And when you have a RICO case, I look to see in the very, very, very near future that there's going to be a motion to dismiss this indictment based on the fact that there's not a lot of specificity of what the different elements are that are alleged to have been, of what the different acts are specifically that have been committed that make up this RICO criminal enterprise. But anyways, let's start listening here.
Count 1. Racketeering Conspiracy, Overview. 1. For decades, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. To do so, Combs relied on the employees, resources, and influence of the multifaceted business empire that he led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in, and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka L. Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, operated his business, headquartered at various times in Manhattan II and Los Angeles, under a variety of United States-based corporate entities, including Bad Boy, The Grand Jury charges. Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global, collectively, the Combs Business. Corporate entities in the Combs Business included, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. 3. At all times relevant to this indictment, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, engaged in a persistent and pervasive pattern of abuse toward women and other individuals. This abuse was, at times, verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual. As part of his pattern of abuse, Combs manipulated women to participate in highly orchestrated performances of sexual activity with male commercial sex workers. At times, Combs, and others acting at his direction, made arrangements for women and commercial sex workers to fly to Combs' location. Combs ensured participation from the women by, among other things, obtaining and distributing narcotics to them, controlling their careers, leveraging his financial support and threatening to cut off the same, and using intimidation and violence. Physical abuse by Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka 4. Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, was recurrent and widely known. On numerous occasions from at least in or about 2009 and continuing for years, Combs assaulted women by, among other things, striking, punching, dragging, throwing objects at, and kicking them. These assaults were, at times, witnessed by others and included one instance at a Los Angeles hotel in or about March 2016, which was captured on video and later publicly reported, where Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a woman as she was attempting to leave. When a member of the hotel security staff intervened, Combs attempted to bribe the staff member to ensure silence. 2. Combs' violence was also not limited to these women. It extended to his employees, witnesses, to his abuse, and others. 5. Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD.
Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. The incident that we're talking about here, again, something that should be familiar to the whole world. This is the incident with Cassie. This is the incident that got leaked to the press, where they had a videotape. It was probably about 2 months ago, and it showed P. Diddy committing a heinous act of domestic abuse. Now, what I think is telling about this indictment is they are taking, in my opinion, after having read this over, they are taking acts that were again, inexcusable acts. You know, putting your hands on your significant other, beating them up, kicking them, hitting them, but to suggest that this is part of a criminal enterprise, to suggest that he was bribing, because remember, to be part of RICO or a RICO charge, every act has to be done in furtherance of advancing his or the enterprise, which in this case they're saying the criminal enterprise is his record label, his clothing labels, his multimedia, as they say, lifestyle brand that he's trying to further and make money on, and that the purpose for him to do that is to make all this money, gain all this power, and then be able to fulfill these deviant sexual desires that he has, where he has freak offs and parties and he does all these things. Where the problem is you don't get to go to RICO and say, again, under the theory of the government here, he's a bad boyfriend, he's a bad husband. But does that make him guilty of RICO? I think it's a stretch. And as you're going to see throughout this indictment, there is not one new thing that doesn't come from one of the multiple lawsuits that were filed over the last 2 years, which shows that the only witnesses that I believe they're going to have show up are going to be these individuals that were seeking money and that were doing what commonly happens when relationships go bad. They were going backwards and telling stories in the least favorable light that could be told for P. Diddy or towards P. Diddy, to try to get as much money as they could out of the civil actions that these were emanating from. Now, again, I find a bad boyfriend, someone who's doing these things, it's a big stretch to say, okay, we're at RICO. RICO was never designed for this. It's like what's happening to Young Thug. You've got prosecutors who are stretching RICO and trying to elongate it to cover things that it was never meant for. And that's the disturbing fact here that we have to look at. Now, there's a lot of people out here that want to see Diddy go down. There's a lot of victims of Diddy. And again, for some of these acts that you're going to hear about, some of the suggestions and some of the things that happened, if they can prove them beyond a reasonable doubt, and they can charge him with extortion, and they can charge him with forced sex and whatever, and charge him with beating this woman up, like we saw on video. If they can get those things on an individualized basis, power to the prosecutor that can do it. It's very, very difficult. The thing about RICO is you don't necessarily have to have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt of all of these things, because you're able to bring up all these bad acts together under the idea that these are multiple criminal acts being committed in furtherance of his criminal enterprise, which in his essence is his entire life, bad boy records, everything that makes him Diddy. And you know, essentially, they're trying to criminalize him not being a good person. I mean, in this case, if this case goes forward, I mean, it's as hard as it is to swallow for everybody that wants to see this case go forward and him get convicted of RICO. This is a very dangerous precedent that's being set by these federal prosecutors, and we've seen a lifetime of overreach that is literally culminating in this case. And again, I am in no way excusing if he did the things that they're talking about here, the behavior. I'm just saying that we have to be careful, because the behavior that's in this indictment can be looked at in two different lights. And one of the things that sticks out for me is they're charging him for allegedly having sex workers present at parties available for consenting adults, and they're paid. These people are sex workers by trade. It's what they do. It's how they make their money. They show up. They're at this party. They do these things for Diddy. And the federal government is now coming in and saying, we're going to criminalize that behavior. My question is, if we start to do that in this instance, where we have consenting adults who have agreed to show up somewhere and travel, maybe they're traveling across state lines. Part of their perks is they're going to get to fly in Diddy's nice jet. They're going to get to come in. They're going to get to stay in 5-star accommodations. They're going to get everything taken care of for them. And now, suddenly, years down the road, they have buyer's remorse on the decision they made. And now we're going to say, well, they were trafficked. And there is human trafficking out there. But I find it hard to be sold here that the way this is alleged to have happened, that it should be considered human trafficking, when we're dealing with consenting adults who by trade are sex workers. If this is allowed to stand, then by definition, is the porno industry in danger, because it's the same idea. Anyway, let's continue listening.
A.K. Love, the defendant, used the Combs business, including certain employees, to carry out, facilitate, and cover up his abuse and commercial sex. Those employees including security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors and other close associates, acted as Combs' intermediaries, and their conduct was facilitated and assisted by Combs' control of the Combs business. The Combs enterprise, from at least and or about 2008, through on or about the date of the filing of this, 6. Indictment, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, and others known and unknown, were members and associates of a criminal organization, the Combs Enterprise, or the Enterprise. Members and associates of the Combs Enterprise engaged in, and attempted to engage in, among other activities, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, coercion and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The Combs Enterprise, including its leadership, its members, and its associates, constituted an enterprise, as defined by Title 18, United States Code, Section 1961, 4, that is, a group of individuals associated in fact, although not a legal entity. The Combs Enterprise consisted 7, of, I, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant. E. Entities within the Combs business, including but not limited to Bad, 3. Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global. E. Individuals employed by and associated with the Combs business. And, IV, others known and unknown. The Combs Enterprise constituted an ongoing organization whose members 8. Functioned as a continuing unit for a common purpose of achieving the objectives of the Combs Enterprise. The Combs Enterprise was engaged in, and its activities affected, interstate and foreign commerce. The Combs Enterprise operated in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere. At all times relevant to this indictment, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, was the leader of the Combs, 9. Enterprise, 10. Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, and others known and unknown, participated in unlawful and other activities related to the conduct of the Combs Enterprise's affairs. These individuals included certain Combs business employees, such as members of Combs security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors, as well as other close associates of Combs, purpose.
All right, so that what we just heard there is very, very important. And again, it's very, very important to understand the structure that the government wants this RICO enterprise to be and what they want it to include. As you saw and read and heard, the enterprise includes Bad Boy Records, basically his clothing lines, his entertainment, everything that makes P. Diddy Diddy, all financial, everything that gives him the ability to function financially is tied into this. And you're going to see how this wraps in. That at the very end, if he is convicted of this, if he's convicted and spends, he could get convicted and spend 5 years in prison. The real damage that's going to be done to Diddy in this case is that the government will be able to request that any enterprise, any businesses, anything that made up this criminal enterprise gets to be forfeited to the government. And they will get to come up with a price tag. And he could technically keep the property, but he will have to he'll either have to turn over the properties, meaning properties owned by the business, cars, houses, cash on hand. It will be forfeited to the government. So what this is, and what this is at the end of the day, the purpose behind this, the real motivation behind this, as the Southern District prosecutor stood up there today at their press conference and said, this is about justice for the victims. It's not about justice for the victims. They don't even name victims in this. The victims have all been paid off, right? And they've gone to them and they're working with them. And this is about money. This is about a huge cash grab takedown of a successful individual, and this is about destroying him, taking away everything he's worked for, taking away all ability for him to have any power or influence ever again. Now, if he did these things, right? If he did things that resulted in him gaining that power, that resulted in him having that business success, and it came out of the result of criminal conduct, it makes sense that he would have to forfeit these things. And when the RICO laws and the criminal forfeiture laws were thought up, they were meant to attack things like organized crime, meaning the mafia. Individuals that came together, and the only way they ever earned any money at all was from criminal conduct and activity, drug dealing, running, doing illegal rackets like illegal gambling, drug dealing, etc. You name it, all illegal stuff, extorting people. So the idea was that all the assets that one would gain from those, government should be able to take that back and essentially reallocate it. Now, in this case, what you have is you have the federal government deciding that they're going to come into a private citizen and criminalize their life. And again, the acts that are contained in this indictment, the acts that are contained in the lawsuits on an individualized basis can and should be prosecuted if they can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The issue is the government's contention that this was being done as part of a criminal enterprise. And I think that is going to be much more difficult to prove than a lot of legal pundits out here think it is. Because they're taking acts of domestic abuse, domestic violence. They're taking acts of consenting adults, and they're attempting now to reclassify them as criminal activity and to say that he was somehow doing these acts for the financial furtherance to further this enterprise. And that the purpose of this enterprise, again, in some of these acts, like, again, if they can prove that he was having these freak offs for the purpose of bringing people in and accumulating digital evidence that he could then use to extort them later and further his record company, further his record label. But you have to understand how hard that is going to be to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, because you've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it wasn't just, hey, I want to have these parties and I'm providing these parties and I'm a man of means. And, this is just his way of what he likes to do sexually or whatever, whether you agree with it or not. It doesn't make it a criminal enterprise, and it doesn't make it a racketeerable offense. And if he was doing it for his own personal purposes, it's not a criminal enterprise. Criminal enterprise requires, I believe it's 3 or more people to come together, commit and conspire to commit, I believe it's 3 or more acts, and criminal acts. And those acts have to be in furtherance of the organization of them, whatever that group is. And you can see this, normally a racketeering indictment would be potentially hundreds of pages with all of this specific breakdown of what it is. This is a 14-page document that lacks. It's amazing how thin this is. And again, one of the things that you're hearing a lot of people say, I heard Vinny Politan talking about it today. I heard a couple of people on CNN talking about it, and it's when the federal government indicts you, they don't indict people unless they know they got a great case. Well, I think we've got the one here where I don't know if this case is as great as everyone thinks it's going to be. Now, perhaps, maybe it's a strategy. Maybe they've got tons and tons of evidence. I guess we'll see. But from the looks of what I'm seeing in this indictment, and we're going to continue reading it here, I don't know. It seems to me to be a very thin document that I think is going to get challenged in the pretrial stage on whether or not there's enough here to warrant going forward to trial. But we'll see. I'm sure it'll make it to trial. But I think there's a lot to question here in this, and a lot to question in the idea that we don't have. It's very rare that you don't even have one other indicted co-conspirator. You just have all these general statements. It's employees. It's this. It's people known and unknown. So it seems like the government is casting this net out with the goal, and this is what I think is happening, that essentially one of their allegations and one of their points in saying that bonds shouldn't be granted here is because they are claiming that P. Diddy or Diddy and his cohorts were intimidating witnesses. So I believe that they're having a problem making the case. Now, they're not going to admit that. But when I was watching the prosecutor, he was very, 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 most prosecutors come out and they want to talk about, their case. And he didn't want to talk about it. So what that tells me, just for my own spidey sense, my own sense of being around the law, my own sense of being around my dad's law office, and I've talked about this. What that tells me is he's casting a net with this indictment. And he's trying to send a message to the people he thinks might talk. Look, we got Diddy. He's locked up. We're going to hold him without a bond. He can't hurt you. He can't get you. Okay? So talk to us. Keep him there. Keep him there. Make sure he doesn't get out. And that's the approach they're going to take with people. And they're still going to build their case. So if I'm Diddy's attorney, in my opinion, you ask for a speedy trial and you bring this thing to trial fast. And you hold the government's feet to the fire and you make them come in and prove this case. And if all they have is Cassie, if all they have is that goofball Rod, whatever his name was, that producer that filed that lawsuit, and then they have some disgruntled employees, that ain't going to be a great case. That ain't going to be a great case at all. I think they jumped the gun on this. I think they're trying to cast a net. I think they're hoping that the floodgates are going to open and that people are going to start talking now that he's in jail. But again, this is why we're going to hear from his attorney. And this is why I believe tomorrow's hearing is going to be extremely important. And it's why I believe that judge will probably not grant bond. Because I think if he is given bond and he's back out, then the way the government intends to make this case goes out the door. The key to them making the case is Diddy's behind bars. And you saw there was already some gamesmanship here in the fact that Diddy was in New York for 12 days waiting on this. They wanted, their goal originally was to surprise him with this indictment, have him be out of the country, have him be across the country, have an excuse to pick him up, make it look like, it was questionable whether or not he didn't surrender. We had to come pick him up. Unfortunately, Diddy's lawyers, well, like I said, they had him come into town. They had him waiting there. He was trying to self-surrender, from my understanding. You're going to hear that discussed by his attorneys. And, that kind of flies in the face of the government's argument that says he shouldn't be granted bond. They put together one hell of a bail package, $50 million, give it up. Not only him, but everybody that would be around him was going to give up their passports. He was going to agree to home confinement. I mean, there's no reason why that shouldn't be granted. Except the government is still needing to cast that net wide enough to capture enough witnesses to go prove the case that they have here. And if you don't believe this stuff happens, that they don't just do things where they think this guy's guilty, we're going to find the evidence later. Look no further than the Tyrone Tucker case, because that's exactly why Franklin Tyrone Tucker was charged, because they believed they would find the evidence later. Turns out, nearly 7 years later, they still haven't found that evidence. In fact, no evidence exists. So it's a very dangerous proposition. It's not the way things should be done. But it's also important to note that prosecutors can indict a ham sandwich. They do this all the time. That's what my dad used to say. You could indict a ham sandwich. And in this case, I think they indicted the ham sandwich that they're hoping turns into an entire buffet, right? But we'll see. Anyways, let's continue listening here to this indictment here and see if it gets any better.
Of the Combs enterprise. The purposes of the Combs enterprise included the following: operating a global business in the media, entertainment, and lifestyle industries, including, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. B. Preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power, reputation, and brand of Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, as a musician, entrepreneur, and figure in the entertainment industry. 4.11. C. Enriching members and associates of the enterprise, including its leader, Combs, and in particular those who demonstrated loyalty to Combs and willingness to conceal his crimes. D. Preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power of the Combs enterprise, including the power of its leader, Combs, through violence, use of firearms, threats of violence, coercion, and verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. E. Fulfilling the personal desires of Combs, particularly those related to Combs' sexual gratification, including through the exploitation of women and the use of commercial sex workers. Enterprise to engage in unlawful acts of violence, including sexual violence, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, coercion and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics distribution, and other crimes, and concealing the commission of such acts. Securing absolute loyalty from members of the Combs enterprise, including F. Enabling Combs and other members and associates of the Combs, through acts of violence and threats. And protecting the Combs enterprise and its members and associates, including H. Combs, from detection and prosecution by LAVW enforcement authorities through acts of intimidation, manipulation, bribery, and threats of retaliation against individuals who witnessed the crimes committed by members and associates of the enterprise.
So as you can see, it's glaring to me when you're reading this. At least it stands out to me that very clearly what the government is doing here is they are taking, again, all of these salacious things that have come out in these lawsuits and in the media, and they're crafting it into the theory for the indictment, the theory of how they're promoting this enterprise. And they know they've got, again, remember, testimony is evidence, right? So if they've got testimony of somebody who could testify to what they saw, witnessed, heard, what they did for him, the government says, hey, we have enough to get this thing to trial. Now, whether they can prove it or not, beyond a reasonable doubt, is a totally different story. Because you have to remember, when you're dealing with some of the things that are contained here, if you take a look, and let's talk about a couple of things here. Enabling Combs and other members, associates of Combs to engage in unlawful acts of violence, including sexual violence, sex trafficking, forced labor. These are all things that we know are being discussed because of the lawsuit from the record producer who says he's moving all these sex workers around. Now, the problem is that he doesn't have knowledge. So when he comes into court to testify, he can put all that in a lawsuit, but they've got to actually prove that Combs had direct knowledge of what was happening here. Because Combs can say, hey, I want to put together a party. I didn't know there were sex workers there. I just said, hey, bring people out. I want people to come. I want it to be a good time for everyone. And his executive assistant decides, you know what, let's hire some sex workers, bring them in and loosen this thing up. Now, many people will scream at me and say, Justice, what are you talking about? Justice process, what are you talking about? Everybody knows. Well, there's a difference between what everybody thinks they know and when you're in the courtroom, what can a prosecutor prove and not prove? So unless they have flipped somebody, and again, maybe they're hiding the indictment, maybe the indictments are under seal, maybe nobody knows that there's all these other people that are indicted. But unless they flip somebody inside the organization, then how else will they have any knowledge of what Sean Combs knew or didn't know? Because there's a lot of people with a lot of hands in the pot. And the other thing is again, when this goes before a jury, the mere fact of hiring prostitutes, it would be like, for instance, if he hires prostitutes to come to a party that he has some friends coming to, that does not necessarily make that a sex trafficking. Okay, that would mean every individual out here that hires a prostitute is going to be charged with sex trafficking. There's other elements that have to be proven in furtherance of that for it to meet that guideline or to meet that crime. So if Combs says, I was doing this for my own personal fun, having some friends over, the state or the government has to prove here. They have to have people with knowledge who could say, no, he was doing this because it had nothing to do with having fun. He was doing this because he wanted to put people in a range of prostitutes, that they didn't know these people were prostitutes, that he was, setting up situations that he could then use this to further the enterprise of Bad Boy Entertainment and Combs Enterprises and all these other things. And they have to actually prove that this was not just him having some freaky fun. I mean, after all, he did call it freak offs. Everyone in the industry went. Everyone knew what was going on there. So again, how do you classify, if consenting adults showed up? Now, if you can prove that specific things happened and that there wasn't consent of the people that were there. But when his attorneys get these people on cross-examination, everybody that walked in there knew what was happening. So I don't find, again, if this is what the government has. Now, if they have, maybe they found a whole treasure trove of blackmail, but, of videotape stuff that nobody, knew. Now, again, we don't know if people consented to those videos being made. We don't know if he said, listen, this is for your protection. We don't know. So again, just the mere presence of those videotapes being on a hard drive, you've got to have people on the inside is what I'm saying. And right now we have nobody named. We have nobody else getting indicted. So the reason why I'm bringing all this up is not because I'm defending Sean Combs or saying, hey, he's innocent. I'm not. When I say innocent, I mean that this guy hasn't done bad things. But what I'm saying is that the appearance of this indictment, the way it's structured, what they're talking about here, the way this is a simple regurgitation and restructuring of the lawsuits that have been filed against Sean Combs to make it meet the elements of RICO, and the fact that there's not named people. There's a lot of general things being talked about, which gives me the idea here that they really don't have that inside knowledge yet, which tells me what they're really trying to do here is they're trying to go after the people, and they're trying to encourage the people that would have this information to come forward and talk to them. And by in the belief, I think, of these prosecutors is that once they can show, and again, after tomorrow, when the bail hearing happens, if that judge denies bond, and they can say, we've got him, he's sitting here. You have a choice. Do you want him to ever come out? If you want him to come out and get out and beat this case, then don't testify. And then he beats this case. Where's that leave you? You know, he'll be more powerful than ever. So now come forward, tell us what's going on, help us out. So I do not think this case at this point, that does not mean that strategy doesn't work or pay off. It could very well pay off, and it could pay off in a big way. But I think the part of known and unknown, I think the unknown is larger than the known right now. I think they have targets, but I don't think there's a lot of people working with them right now. And I think that's this arrest was still part of the strategy of building the case. So if that's the case, don't be surprised. And again, Diddy's attorneys are going to have a great idea because the discovery process is going to start. They're going to start turning over stuff. Don't be surprised if you wouldn't see a race to the courtroom to say, let's try this case right now as is, and not give them the opportunity to keep building this case if it drags on in pretrial. But we'll see. Anyways, let's keep listening to the indictment here and see what else they have for us.
Means and methods of the enterprise. 12. Among the means and methods by which Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, and other members and 5. Associates of the Combs Enterprise conducted and participated in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs Enterprise included the following: a Combs and other members and associates of the Combs Enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Freak-offs were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed,
and see, the reason why I don't find this compelling is because what this is a regurgitation of the lawsuit from the executive producer. This is a regurgitation of the lawsuit of his ex-girlfriend, Cassie. That's where they got this information from. And there's no specifics. There's nothing more specific than what you would have found in those lawsuits. And that's a big concern here, where it says, under the pretense of what they're talking about right here is what they learned from Cassie. And that he was basically an abusive boyfriend. And they're taking that and saying, okay, well, he was forcing her into a relationship. And then you have the information that the producer, I can't remember his name now off the top of my head, but the producer, you have this information here where he told them about the freak-offs. And all of this information has come directly from that lawsuit, which tells me they haven't gone deeper than those lawsuits. They're relying on those 4 witnesses, those 4 people that filed lawsuits. They're relying on them for this case. And they can do that. Any testimony they provide is considered evidence. They come in, they give their testimony. They went and raided Diddy, and they've got guns, they've got weapons, they've got the drug mule down there to say that there's drugs. But again, linking all this to Diddy. Some can say, well, it could be assumed that Diddy had to know the drugs were there. Well, we don't assume in court. A prosecutor has to come in with more than assumptions, and it's got to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And what I'm seeing here, what I've read here, and again, I've already read this. I did it in preparation for coming to talk to you guys about it. This is a weak case, and I'm probably the only one right now saying that, but I really believe it. I really believe it. And I believed it from day one that this was going to be based on these lawsuits The government didn't move right away 6 months ago, but I think what's happened here is everything's dried up. And based on what was said by that prosecutor in his interview, they believe it's dried up because Diddy has taken action to try to keep people from talking to them. So I believe they sat down and said, we have two options here. Let not do anything at all, or make a move and see if the floodgates open. And they're gambling. They're throwing a Hail Mary pass, in my opinion. And for them, they felt like they derived enough out of the raid. Because remember, three things. They have to prove 3 crimes committed for RICO to be proven. And, for them, I think the idea here is they come into court and they muddy the waters and they sling enough mud on the guy's name. They feel like, hey, maybe we can get a jury to say, yeah, he probably did at least 3 of those things and get the conviction. But he's not going to be bringing in public defenders to defend him here. He's going to be bringing in really solid attorneys who are going to know how to talk to. He's going to be bringing in guys like Steele down in Georgia, who's going to come in and kick ass and run circles around these prosecutors if they're not prepared, if they're not ready, and they're going to bring it. So this is not going to be an easy case for the prosecutors, regardless of what everybody else out there seems to think. I think it's going to be a very, 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 very uphill battle.
Masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. In arranging these freak-offs, Combs, with the assistance of members and associates of the Combs enterprise, transported, and caused to be transported, commercial sex workers across state lines and internationally. Freak-offs occurred regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved multiple commercial sex workers. During freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received 4 fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. B. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including high-ranking, supervisors, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and other Combs business employees, facilitated the freak-offs by, among other things, booking hotel rooms for the freak-offs, stocking the hotel rooms in advance with the required freak-off supplies, including controlled substances, baby oil, lubricant, extra linens, and lighting, cleaning the hotel rooms after the freak-offs to try to mitigate room damage, arranging for travel for victims, commercial sex workers, and Combs to and from freak-offs, resupplying Combs with requested supplies, delivering large sums of cash to Combs to pay the commercial sex workers, and scheduling the delivery of 4 fluids. In or about March 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami, Florida and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized various freak-off supplies, including narcotics and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. C. Combs subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse to cause the victims to engage in freak-offs. Combs maintained control over his victims through, among other things.
So I guess we are going to start to have a novel case here where the Southern District of New York is going to assert that there is a certain amount of baby oil and lubricant that one might possess that would be possession with intent to sex traffic. I mean, it's ridiculous. It really is. I mean, clearly, I'm curious to see if those thousands of baby oil bottles were found all in one place, or were they found scattered all over multiple houses and residences. I mean, obviously they have to have someone here, I guess someone here, I believe. A lot of it's probably, I know the person that they have. I think it's the executive record producer or whatever that filed that lawsuit, because this is all the information he provided, a little more detail. But I think what they've done with it is is the additional detail probably has come after they went in and did the searches and they found bottles of baby oil and whatever else they found. And they came back to these people and said, hey, yeah, we found this and we found this and we found this. And they said, oh, those are supplies for the free calls. I mean, but it's like, you know, they label this stuff. They come up with a special name. They classify these things, and then they say, okay, this is a criminal activity. This is, uh, you know, sex trafficking because he had sex workers there. Well, what if it was if consenting adults decided to pay a sex worker, and that's what he was doing here? How do we get to trafficking? I mean, and again, what I say, the reason why I ask this question is because if it's trafficking for him, then are we going to expand this and say, okay, everybody that buys a prostitute is trafficking? I mean, I think it's a stretch. And I think where prosecutors are going with these laws, listen, there is human trafficking out there, but when you see prosecutors attempting to misuse these laws in a case like this and criminalize behavior that while we don't agree with it, it may not be part of your lifestyle, it may not be what you agree with, but when we are coming in and using the apparatus of the federal government to come in and take away a man's freedom, take all of his assets. Again, there's a book I read a long time ago, and my dad read it with me. We used to read books together and discuss them. It talked about how the federal government, the federal court system had expanded. Now, this is back in the early 2000s. Had begun expanding to a point that they had literally criminalized so much of our everyday life that many Americans were walking around and had no idea how many laws they were breaking each day because of how the expansion of the federal government and what it covered, what the laws covered, what the federal statutes covered. And in this case, you're seeing that exact situation. Somebody doesn't like Sean P. Diddy Combs. So what they've done is they've taken that big spotlight of the federal government and they shined it in on his life. And they picked off all these things that they're now calling crimes. And they've grouped them together. And they're saying, oh, this guy was operating a criminal enterprise. And what I'm trying to say is, look, he's an unlikable character. He's clearly done some bad things. But how we treat the worst of our society defines us as a society. It's not how we treat the best. It's easy to treat the best good. It's how we treat the bottom. If we allow them to do this, then we are essentially signing off on the idea that the federal government can turn on anyone it wants. They can come into your house and they can come into your life and they can reanalyze the last 10 years of your life and say, you know what? Turns out you were breaking this law and this law and this law and this law and this law. And we decide that this is the enterprise of justice as a process. And you were doing it to further it. And, your wife, your kids, your cousin, your mother, your father, all assisted you with doing these different things that you didn't even know were illegal, but they're illegal. We decided they are. We decided we're going to hold you accountable for them. And because you become an enemy of the state. And as a result, your house, your cars, everything you've ever worked for, we get to forfeit. We're going to prove this case in court. And that's what they're doing here. And I understand it's not popular to say because a lot of people want to hear, oh, Diddy's terrible. And he's done terrible things. But the way they're going about this is concerning. And it's concerning in a tremendously big way, in my opinion. If my dad was here, he'd agree with me. I know he would. Anyways, let's continue listening to the indictment.
Physical violence, promises of career opportunities, granting and threatening to withhold financial support, and by other coercive means, including tracking their whereabouts, dictating the victim's appearance, monitoring their medical records, controlling their housing, and supplying them with controlled substances. Among other things, hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, at times, by their hair. These assaults often resulted in injuries that took days or weeks to heal. Combs also threatened victims' careers and livelihoods, including if they resisted participating in freak-offs. Victims believed they could not refuse Combs' demands without risking their financial or job security or without repercussions in the form of physical or emotional abuse. Combs also used the sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating recordings that he made during freak-offs as collateral to ensure the continued obedience and silence of the victims. During and separate from freak-offs, Combs, D. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including Combs, security personnel, at times carried firearms. On more than one occasion, Combs himself carried, or brandished firearms to intimidate and threaten others, including victims of and witnesses to his abuse. In or about March 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami, Florida and 7. Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s with defaced serial numbers, as well as a drum magazine. Over victims by following his directions regarding financial payments to victims, advancing or suppressing the victim's career opportunities, and acquiring the controlled substances Combs used to keep the victims compliant. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise at times witnessed Combs' violence toward the victims, or the victims' injuries caused by Combs, without intervening. Instead, members and associates of the Combs enterprise helped conceal the violence and abuse by, among other things, assisting Combs in monitoring and preventing victims from leaving locations, such as hotels or Combs residences. These occasions included instances in which a victim was required to remain in hiding sometimes for several days at a time to recover from injuries Combs inflicted, without being publicly observed. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise also assisted Combs in locating and contacting victims who attempted to flee. Members and associates of
And that part right there is clearly referencing, and again, is clearly information that came from Cassie, his ex-girlfriend, and is clearly behavior that, while again, that behavior is absolutely unacceptable and absolutely should not be done, that is behavior that could be said was being done for domestic purposes. And while that's still prosecutable, it would not be in furtherance of a criminal enterprise. It would be more in furtherance of Diddy being a bad boyfriend, a bad husband, and making bad decisions in how he manages those relationships. Anyways, let's continue listening.
of the Combs enterprise enabled Combs control his abuse. When employees, witnesses to his abuse, or others threatened Combs' authority or reputation, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise engaged in acts of violence, threats of financial and reputational harm, and verbal abuse. These acts of violence included kidnapping and arson. In addition, on multiple occasions, Combs threw both objects and people, as well as hit, dragged, choked, and shoved others. When Combs' authority or reputation was threatened by the possibility of negative publicity or legal or law enforcement action against him, including in or about late 2023 following public allegations of Combs' crimes, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise pressured witnesses and victims, including through attempted bribery, to stay silent and not report what they experienced or knew to law enforcement. On phone calls, Combs and other members and associates of the enterprise, among other things, provided these victims and witnesses with a false narrative of events in an effort to conceal Combs' crimes. Combs caused these calls to be recorded on at least 2 occasions. The Racketeering Conspiracy, 13. From at least in or about 2008, through on or about the date of the filing of this indictment, in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, A/K Love, the defendant, and others, known and unknown, being persons employed by and associated with the Combs enterprise, described in paragraphs 6 through 12 of this indictment, an enterprise engaged in, and the activities, of which affected, interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly combined, conspired, confederated, and agreed together, and with each other to violate the racketeering laws of the United States, to wit, Title 18, United States Code, Section 1962, c. that is, to conduct and participate, directly and indirectly, in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, as that term is defined in Title 18, United States Code, Sections 1961, 1, and 1961, 5, consisting of a. multiple acts involving kidnapping, chargeable under the following provisions of state law: California Penal Code Section 207, kidnapping, California Penal Code Section 21 a. 664, attempt, California Penal Code Section 31, aiding and abetting, and California Penal Code Section 182, conspiracy. b. multiple acts involving arson, chargeable under the following provisions of state law: California Penal Code Section 451, arson, California Penal Code Section 21, a. 664, attempt, California Penal Code Section 31, aiding and abetting, and California Penal Code Section 182, conspiracy. c. multiple acts involving bribery, chargeable under the following provisions of state law: California Penal Code Section 137, a. bribery of a witness, California Penal Code Section 21 a. 664, attempt, California Penal Code Section 31, aiding and abetting, and California Penal Code Section 182, conspiracy. d. multiple acts indictable under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1512, relating to tampering with a witness, victim, or an informant. e. multiple acts indictable under Title 18, United States Code, Sections 1589 and 2, relating to forced labor. f. multiple acts indictable under Title 18, United States Code, Sections 1591 and 2, relating to sex trafficking. Multiple acts indictable under Title 18, United States Code, Sections 2421, 2422, and 2, relating to transportation and inducement to travel for purposes of prostitution and other illegal sexual activities. And h. multiple offenses involving the possession with intent to distribute, or distribution of narcotics and controlled substances, including cocaine, oxycodone, alprazolam, 3,4, methylenedicoxymethamphetamine, 4-bromo-2, 5-dimethoxyphenethylamine, gamma-hydroxybutyric acid, and ketamine, in violation of Title 21, United States Code, Sections 841, A, 1, B, 1, C, B, 1, E, B, 2, and 846, distribution and possession with intent to distribute, and conspiracy to do the same, and Title 18, United States Code, Section 2, aiding, abetting, and willfully causing. 14. It was a part of the conspiracy that Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, agreed that a conspirator would, 10. commit at least 2 acts of racketeering activity in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise. Notice of special sentencing factor, from at least in or about 2009, up to and including in or about 2018, in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, as part of his agreement to conduct and participate in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity. Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, agreed to, in and affecting interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly recruit, entice, harbor, transport, provide, obtain, advertise, maintain, patronize, and solicit by any means a person, knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that means of force, threats of force, fraud, and coercion, as described in Title 18, United States Code, Section 1591, E, 2, and any combination of such means, would be used to cause the person to engage in a commercial sex act, in violation 15, of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1591, A. 1, and B. 1. Title 18, United States Code, Section 1962, D. Count 2, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion.
All right, so that concludes count one. And I think you can see it's count one. It's the witness intimidation that is the part that is leading to no bond. TJ Mack, how you doing? Yes, TJ Mack, that is correct. He is in jail right now. He is being held without bond. Tomorrow they're going to be. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but I'll get into further details. But just to kind of summarize, answer your question, he had an initial appearance before a magistrate. That magistrate superficially denied bond. So that allowed for his attorneys to immediately appeal that to the actual judge that will be handling his trial. So tomorrow at 3:30, he will appear. They put forth a bail package. Part of the bail package and the strategy to get bond was they had him show up 12 days ago in New York. They put together a $50 million bond package with a team of individuals that were going to turn over their passport along with him, and he was going to go on home confinement. The judge turned it down because they said that, again, as we just heard here, part of the elements of this crime is witness intimidation and intimidating witnesses. So they said that it's too dangerous for him to be out, and as a result, he should be held without bond. So we'll see what the judge does tomorrow, but it'll be very interesting. But as you can see, the behavior and the information that makes up for count one, you go back and you look at all of those alleged criminal activities that were furthering this criminal enterprise. State's going to be hard pressed to find some of those. I mean, it's going to be a very, very, very difficult case. It's going to be a lot harder than a lot of people think because, I don't know. I don't think they got the goods. I don't think they got it. I just don't. I think that I think it'll be interesting. But anyways, let's look at count two now and hear what count two is all about.
The grand jury further charges, from at least in or about 2009, up to and including in or about 2018, in the Southern 16 District of New York and elsewhere, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, in and affecting interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly recruited, enticed, harbored, transported, provided, obtained, advertised, maintained, patronized, and solicited by any means a person, knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that means of force, threats of force, fraud, and coercion, as described in Title 18, United, 11. States Code, Section 1591, E. 2, and any combination of such means, would be used to cause the person to engage in a commercial sex act, and attempted, aided and abetted, and willfully caused the same, to wit, Combs recruited, enticed, harbored, transported, and maintained a person, victim. -1, and attempted, aided and abetted, and willfully caused victim 1, to engage in commercial sex acts, knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that victim 1 was engaging in commercial sex acts as a result of force, fraud, and coercion. Title 18, United States Code, Sections 1591A, L, B, 1, 1594, A, and 2. Count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution. The grand jury further charges, 17. From at least in or about 2009, up to and including in or about 2024, in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, knowingly transported an individual in interstate and foreign commerce with intent that the individual engage in prostitution, and attempted, aided and abetted, and willfully caused the same, to wit, Combs transported, aided and abetted, and willfully caused the transportation of female victims and commercial sex workers in interstate and foreign commerce on multiple occasions with the intent that they engage in prostitution. Title 18, United States Code, Sections 242(1).
All right, so this is the most important part. This is what I told you. I think this is the real meat and potatoes of what this case is all about. And it is this right here, the forfeiture allegations. You're going to see they went through great pains to define the criminal enterprise as everything that makes up Sean Diddy Combs. All of his businesses, his houses, his assets. Now you're going to see why. Because if he's found guilty of anything, it opens the door for forfeiture to take place. And for them to come in and forfeit his house, forfeit his cars, forfeit his money, everything goes bye-bye. So, very scary situation when you think of it like that. But anyways, let's finish this off because we are pretty much at the end. But I want to jump in and let you know, pay attention to the forfeiture, which is essentially the original, I guess it would be pass line. I can't remember. But yeah, it's upsetting. But we're going to go ahead and play this out.
A. and 2. Forfeiture allegations. As a result of committing the offense alleged in Count 1 of this indictment, 18. Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, shall forfeit to the United States, pursuant to Title 18, United States Code, Section 1963, any and all interests the defendant acquired or maintained in violation of Title 18, United 12 States Code, Section 1962. Any and all interests in, securities of, claims against, and property or contractual rights of any kind affording a source of influence over, the enterprise named and described here in which the defendant established, operated, controlled, conducted, and participated in the conduct of, in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1962. And any and all property constituting and derived from proceeds obtained, directly and indirectly, said offense, including but not limited to a sum of money in United States currency representing the amount of proceeds traceable to the commission of said offense. 19. As a result of committing the offense alleged in Count 2 of this indictment, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, shall forfeit to the United States, pursuant to Title 18, United States Code, Section 1594, any and all property, real and personal, involved in, used, or intended to be used to commit or to facilitate the commission of said offense and any and all property traceable to such property. Any and all property, real and personal, constituting or derived from proceeds obtained, directly or indirectly, as a result of said offense, including but not limited to a sum of money in United States currency representing the amount of property involved in said offense and proceeds traceable to the commission of said offense. As a result of committing the offense alleged in Count 3 of this indictment, Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love, the defendant, shall forfeit to the United States, pursuant to I. Title 18, United States Code, Section 2428, any and all property, real and personal, constituting or derived from proceeds obtained, directly or indirectly, as a result of said offense. And any and all property, real or personal, that was used or intended to be used to commit or facilitate the commission of said offense, and E. Title 18, United States Code, Section 981, A. 11XC, and Title 28, United States Code, Section 2461, any 13. And all property, real and personal, that constitutes or is derived from proceeds traceable to the commission of said offense, including but not limited to a sum of money in United States currency representing the amount of proceeds traceable to the commission of said offense. Substitute Assets Provision, 21. If any of the above described forfeitable property, as a result of any act or omission, of the defendant, cannot be located upon the exercise of due diligence. A. B. Has been transferred or sold to, or deposited with, a third person. Has been placed beyond the jurisdiction of the court. C. D. E. Has been substantially diminished in value. or has been commingled with other property which cannot be subdivided without difficulty. It is the intent of the United States, pursuant to Title 18, United States Code, Section 1963, M, Title 21, United States Code, Section 853, P, and Title 28, United States Code, Section 2461, C, to seek forfeiture of any other property of the defendant up to the value of the above forfeitable property. Title 18, United States Code, Section 9.
All right, guys. So there you have it. That is the indictment. So I want you to really pay close attention to the end of the indictment, because that is where it really tells you what's really going on here. He will be forced to forfeit his entire fortune. Let's say he gets convicted, judge sentences him to 10 years. You might think, oh, that's okay, 10 years. He was facing life. He does 10 years. But when he gets out, he's a pauper. He's no different than you or I, because they're going to be able to utilize. Now, if he worked out a plea bargain with them where he probably got 40 years in prison, he wouldn't have forfeited anything necessarily, or maybe a certain portion. But that's what this is all about. And for P. Diddy, that is a significant sum of money that they know they're going to get to keep. At some point, it'll get locked up, and then they'll get to keep it. Now, what I want to do is, I guess this will be a great time to go over the state of the case. I hit the wrong transition to the wrong spot, because this is a situation where I believe the government is reaching. And I believe they've reached in here, and they're hoping it's going to be it's a gamble, and they're hoping it's going to pay off in a big way. But where are we at? Basically, P. Diddy, for those of you wondering, is locked up right now. He is in jail right now as we speak. He is being held with no bond. He was arrested at the Park Hyatt Hotel on, I guess it would have been Monday night at 9 p.m. He'd been in New York City for 12 days awaiting the arrest. The strategy from his defense team was to actually turn himself in, which actually, when you turn yourself in the federal system, that really gives you a great shot at getting bond. So they had him arrive. They put together a $50 million bail package, and they were waiting for the call for him to be able to turn himself in. Instead, the government shows up with a tremendous show of force at this 5-star hotel and arrests Diddy at 9 p.m. He's taken into custody, and he was being held. He wasn't technically being booked in or anything like that, because he needed to go before the magistrate. So he's taken before the federal magistrate. The federal magistrate doesn't try cases. They literally just handle arraignments, initial appearances, etc. Goes before the federal magistrate. She informs him that, hey, you've got to increase your bets. And as a result, he does. In terms of things. So he, has been picked up, and like I said, currently is being held with no bond. Now tomorrow he will have a hearing at 3:30 in the afternoon, and it will be before the judge that is going to try his case. So as you're going to hear his defense attorney, they're feeling much more confident that bond will be set, and he'll have the opportunity to bond out. He'll be on home confinement. So anyways, that's going to be kind of the final thing I want to play for you, is listening to his defense attorneys and hearing from his side. We've just heard from the prosecution. I want to take you through and let you hear everything that they are saying, that the defense is saying in this case. And I want to give you an opportunity to hear it if you haven't, because it's quite interesting. It really, really is. And I think it's worth the listen. So let's pull that up. Give me a moment. Now, this is his attorney. I'll set the scene. Come down here. So this is his attorney coming out right after bond had been right after the initial appearance. Bond has been denied, and this is his attorney talking to the press. Quick couple of minutes statement, talking to the press about the case, the charges, and everything that's going on at that moment.
Who's going to be watching Jesse and Delilah? Everybody down front. Who's going to be watching the kids?
All right. So this was the first step. We have a bail appeal scheduled for tomorrow at 3:30 in front of Judge Carter, the district judge assigned to this case. I think that we made the points that we've been wanting to make. I think it came out. Mr. Combs is a fighter. He's going to fight this to the end. He's innocent. He came to New York to establish his innocence. He's not afraid. He's not afraid of the charges. There's nothing that the government said in their presentation today that changes anyone's mind about anything. He's been looking forward to this day. He's been looking forward to clearing his name, and he's going to clear his name. And we're going to stand by his side as he does. We believe in him wholeheartedly. He didn't do these things. This was a 10-year relationship. There's no coercion. There's no crime. There's basically just, someone who brought a civil case and now is finding themselves as a witness in a criminal case. And we're going to fight this case with everything we have, as is he. And eventually he's going to be shown to be innocent. And so tomorrow we fight again, and we'll fight every day until we don't have to fight anymore.
Where is he being detained?
Last night instead of today as planned?
I don't know. The question is, why did it happen last night instead of today? I don't know the answer to that question. I just want to make one point very clear. We have no power. All we can do is show good faith. He got on a plane and he came here. And if he stayed here for one day before the case started, or for 1 year before the case started, he was going to stay as long as he needed to stay. It ends up being only 12 days. That's fine. That's what the government wanted to do. The government didn't want him to turn himself in. He came here to turn himself in. Why doesn't the government want him to turn himself in? Because then they can't ask for detention. So they go and they arrest him. They arrest a guy who came to New York to turn himself in. But
and there you go, guys. That to me is the hallmark sign of a desperate prosecutor. When they're playing games like that, this guy shows up to turn himself in. 95% of the time, they're going to let him turn himself in. Instead, in this case, they pick him up instead. As his attorney has eloquently explained, what they were really angling at was to try to get pretrial detention by either having to go pick him up somewhere across the country, or trying to say, hey, he's not reporting on time, he's not reporting here, so we're going to need to lock him down. But as you've heard here from his attorney, that is not necessarily, what needs to happen. But he, like I said, this is a situation where, the government has clearly, in my opinion, overreached. And I think when you're seeing the fire here, and I think this guy's going to do a really, really good job, because he's really putting it to it, and he knows that this is a case that shouldn't be being prosecuted right now. This is a rush job, and I think the state's going to pay for that in the end. But we'll see. Let me hear this out. We got about another 50 seconds.
we're going to make all these points again tomorrow, and we'll make them as much as we can until we get them out. So that's all I have. Huh?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Wait, what was the question? We're appealing. We're no bail. He's detained.
We're appealing it.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're appealing the decision to hold him without bail. Tomorrow at 3:30. 3:30, same place.
Will he be here?
Bail appeal. Bail appeal tomorrow at 3:30, same courtroom, different judge. He's doing fine. He's a fighter. And he's going to fight this. All right, I'm going to go. Thank you. I don't get into that stuff.
Okay. How would the
All right. So, anyways, guys, there you have it. That was the initial statement from his attorney um, following the arraignment. So you could tell motions were running very, very high. Obviously, for him, he's a guy who very passionately feels that his client is innocent. So I certainly can understand and appreciate why he would feel how he does, why he would be fired up. But he's ready to fight. I like it. I like what I'm hearing out of him. So now, later on, a few hours ago, he sat down with a local news organization to discuss the case. And here's what he had to say. It's about 12 minutes long. This is the last of what we're going to listen to here. Then we'll wrap it up and talk about Diddy. We're going to keep covering this case. This is going to be covered on this channel because, again, I find this to be something we need to watch because this is a situation where, many people are caught up in the bad guy that this guy is. But the bad guy still deserves to have a fair process. And that's what we've got to strive to do in this case. So, anyways, let me get this over here queued up.
Thank you, Caitlin. So I think we have a good shot tomorrow. Tomorrow we argue in front of the district court judge whose case this is. Today we argued in front of a magistrate judge whose case this is not. We'll never have this magistrate as our judge again. But tomorrow we argue in front of Judge Carter, and it's Judge Carter's case till the end. So hope springs eternal, but I think we have strong arguments, and I think we have a good chance.
Well, and what prosecutors are arguing is not only does your client pose a flight risk, because obviously he's incredibly wealthy, has access to planes and a lot of staff, even though you said he turned over his passport to you months ago. They were also worried about him being able to interfere with witnesses and calling them. And so I guess the question is, how do you assure the court that that won't happen if prosecutors are saying, this is someone who's attempted to bribe security staff and has already threatened and interfered with witnesses?
So I think the most important thing, even more important than the passport, is that Mr. Combs came to New York on September 5th. As soon as we realized that this indictment was going to be coming down in a matter of weeks, maybe months, but sometime soon, Mr. Combs got on a plane, left his home in Florida, flew to New York. I called the prosecutors myself. I said, Mr. Combs is in New York. Do you want to know where he is? If you want to know where he is, I'll tell you where he is. But he wants to surrender. He's here to surrender. They didn't want him to surrender because if he surrenders, they don't get to tell the judge that he's a flight risk and he's a danger. Because who, as a danger and a flight risk, would fly to New York and surrender? So they didn't want him to surrender.
So since September 5th, you had known, you expected it was likely he was going to formally face charges.
So I really knew he was formally going to face charges on March 25th, the day of the searches. When Homeland Security searched his Los Angeles home, his Miami home, and his airplane, I knew that day by looking at the.
So interesting take there from his attorney. He said he knew on the 25th of March that Diddy was going to be charged. And I guess it was by looking at the search and everything that was going on, looking at the items, looking at the way it was being done, he knew an indictment was coming. So Diddy's been being prepared. He's been being advised that this was going to happen. I think we all kind of knew to a degree it was going to happen. The only question was again, would they get someone to flip over or break in their favor who could really break this case wide open? Maybe one of the higher ups, maybe one of his executive assistants. It strikes me, I remember when I was covering the case a few months ago, that there were like two main executive assistants who had a lot of power and influence in this case. But clearly, to me, this case is one that, I think screams out at just how unfair and biased it is for them to be proceeding on this case, and how dangerous it is for society as a whole to allow for the criminalization of basically, the criminalization of your life. Again, as I talked about earlier in the broadcast, there was a book about the federal government and the federal system and how they had pretty much accomplished criminalizing everything. And how at any one point, if the federal government wanted to turn its lights on you, unbeknownst to you, you've probably committed. The average American, they say, commits about 5 crimes a day. So they said if a government entity wanted to turn its lights on you and say we're coming in, we're going to find stuff, there's probably things that they would find that you didn't even know you were doing that are illegal, that aren't right, that are against the law. So the question, though, then becomes: were those acts, those alleged criminal acts? And you get a creative prosecutor who says, okay, now we're going to go and say, okay, these things happened. And now we're going to say, well, Sean P. Diddy Combs runs a business. And as a result, he's trying to further his business by, doing these things and having freak offs and, I guess putting people in precarious situations. So, it'll be interesting. Like I said, it'll be very, very interesting. But let's continue listening to his attorney because this is actually the first time I've heard this. I just decided to play this. I found it in my research. And I thought I wanted to react to it just as we were listening to it. So let's continue listening.
The search warrants. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. This is not my first or 100th rodeo. That this was going to come as a matter of time. What I realized in early September is that it was coming soon. And so it was time for Mr. Combs to come to New York, which he did. And let me just point out one very important thing. The prosecutors are seizing on something that happened 8 years ago. This video that we've all seen, and it's a bad video for Mr. Combs, and he said so himself when he gave his apology. This is 8 years ago, and the prosecutors are talking about him bribing a hotel security worker. There was no criminal investigation. This was just a matter of personal embarrassment because he and the person in the video were in the midst of a 10-year relationship that was difficult at times, that was toxic at times, but it was mutually so. And this whole notion that Mr. Combs is forcing drugs on someone is just nonsensical, and it's going to prove to not be true.
Well, on that video, he initially denied the allegations when his then girlfriend, who is in that video, filed a lawsuit last fall. And we have that video. I should note CNN was the first outlet to exclusively report on it. He denied that happened when she filed it in a complaint. And then when the video came out is when he apologized for it.
So I wasn't his lawyer back then. So I don't, and I don't think he denied. I mean, I think the lawyers were the ones mostly making the denials. I think they were denying sex crimes. I mean, because at the end of the day, the gravamen of that civil complaint wasn't a misdemeanor assault, which is what you see on that video. Not minimizing it, but it's a misdemeanor assault. What the gravamen of the complaint was sex crimes, and he denied that, and he still does.
Well, and you're saying that this is all just about that one relationship, but when you read through the indictment, they say that there's not just one victim. They say there's multiple victims here today, and what I heard described was they said they have 50 witnesses or victims.
Yeah, I think it's 49 witnesses and 1 victim. I think if you broke it down, and I say that because count 2, which is the sex trafficking count, has victim number 1, and there is no victim number 2 anywhere in the indictment.
So you're saying that there are not other women, because what they were essentially arguing here is that he coerced and forced women into sex acts by using physical force, financial pressure, emotional abuse, and narcotics for what they described as these freak-off sessions. They saying that he self-described them as that.
Yeah, there's 1 victim in the indictment. That the charging
but
document.
1 victim does count, right?
No, of course, but it's not 50. I mean, what they did, it's a little too cute, is it's 50 witnesses or victims. Well, it's 1 victim. That's all that's in the indictment.
Our reporter who was in the courtroom today said that he appeared to have a stunned expression on his face. Was he surprised that he was arrested last night?
No, he definitely was not. I mean, I told him myself.
So notice how the interviewer, I'm not sure who the interviewer is in this, but notice how she is trying to, she shifts from, is there 50, there's 50 victims. And again, this is why I say when my bullshit detector is up, right, in this, because this is not how you normally see federal indictments handled. Most of the time, which is why much respect is shown when the feds indict somebody, there's a lot of details. There's a lot of victims. There's a lot of things. And in this case, they indicted Diddy based on Cassie's lawsuit and the lawsuit of the executive producer. I'm still trying to remember his name. But that's it. That is it. You know, and if that's it, then to me, and the guy was Little Rod Jones. That's who the producer is. I just looked him up. But if that's what they're indicting him on, right? If that's all they have, this is a extremely weak case. And you don't, to prove RICO, you have to have the specifics. You have to show that that Diddy committed at least 2 acts. I thought it was 3, 2 acts to the benefit of the enterprise, the criminal enterprise. And what the Southern District Court has done is they have attempted to manufacture the appearance that every financial thing that Diddy has is part of this criminal enterprise. And I can't help but think that maybe down the line at some stage here, they might do a attempt to freeze assets. We'll see what happens. We'll see how it plays out. But I think that would really be interesting, because if they freeze assets, his attorneys don't get paid anymore. Because essentially what they're going to be saying is that all of the money that he's made, everything, is fruits of the poisonous tree, in the sense that they're all potentially able to be forfeited if he ends up getting convicted, which I think is garbage. I mean, I think this case is garbage. I really do not think that this case is very strong in its given state. Now, I think there's an ulterior motive, but I think we'll see what this guy does. We'll see what he says. We'll see if he hints that they're going to move forward. I think it would be in Diddy's best interest to move this case forward at lightning speed and take it to trial, because I really think the prosecutors are definitely lacking the proof in this case, and lacking the fact that it's that this happened in a way, and that they can prove that, again, as you heard his attorney state, that these acts were not done on a personal basis. And even though they could still be criminal, if it was done for a personal reason, it's not RICO. And he's not guilty of RICO. And that's what you got to understand. That's the most important thing, I think, to understand about this case. But let's continue listening to this guy. He's pretty good. We've got a part 2 as well, so stay tuned on that. Let's take a listen.
In early September, you are going to be arrested soon, and you're going to be charged with racketeering, and you're going to be charged with sex trafficking. So come to New York. It wasn't a long conversation. He agreed. So we knew this was coming, and in fact, we offered that he would turn himself in.
So if there are these witnesses and victims, and as you're saying that you believe it's one victim and 49 witnesses who saw this behavior, that's pretty powerful, though, to have that many people who have, if they go to court and argue that they witnessed this behavior by your client.
Well,
what's your defense against that going to be?
So my defense is very well established. I interviewed myself the different men who were being brought sort of into Mr. Combs and this person's intimate situation. I've flown around the country. I've interviewed a large number of them. There's not the slightest inkling, according to the interviews that I've done, of anything that's coercive, non-consensual. Nobody was too drunk. Nobody was too high. These were adults in a relationship. This is a 10-year relationship. We can't forget that. This is a 10-year relationship, and it was adults and consensual, and everybody who was there wanted to be there. So I feel very confident in our position.
You said you interviewed the men, but what about the women?
I haven't interviewed the woman's not available to me. She's presumably a grand jury witness, and we would not, we cannot try to interview a grand jury witness.
And you don't think that there are any other women who are going to say that they were coerced into this, given drugs, and essentially as prosecutors were saying that that's what kept them compliant?
So there are a lot
sessions.
of women in these civil cases. There's been a mountain of civil cases ever since the civil case that was filed in November. I don't see them as victims in the indictment. That's my point.
And so when you talk about that video of Cassie Ventura, that was his.
So interesting stuff here. From the standpoint of what he's saying here, he's saying that, again, these are personal acts. These are things being done for his own personal gratification that are not being done to further any type of criminal enterprise. That's going to be their defense. And again, as I said earlier, you're going to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what he did was, that they were illegal acts, but not just that they were illegal acts, but that they were being done to further the interest of the alleged racketeering enterprise that the prosecution has set up in this case and explained in this case. Now, I think it's important to understand and recognize here the fact that the games that are being played by this prosecution team are really strange to me to be seeing this happen in federal court. Specifically, the games and the gamesmanship about, hey, listen, he shows up in New York for 12 days. They're itching to pick him up. They finally do pick him up, and they don't let him turn himself in. I got a real problem with that. I think that's a pretty terrible thing for the state to be doing in this case, and for the police to be doing in this case. I mean, if you got the goods, then let's go, bring it out to the table and get it done. Otherwise, you don't do it. You just don't do it. You just don't come out. Anyways, let's continue listening here.
His then girlfriend in the video. I mean, just when you saw that, you said it's a bad video. It's pretty difficult to watch.
It is, no question. So let me tell you what happened.
Will that be used as evidence in court, do you think?
100%, 100%. So what I said in court today, and I'll say it again here, is the two of them were in a hotel. It was just the two of them in a hotel room. She found out that he was seeing someone else. She was going through his phone. She hit him in the head with his own phone. And then she walks into the hallway with two bags. One of the bags has all of his clothing that she is taking from him, which is why he runs out in a towel. So this isn't her fleeing from one of these freak-offs. Why would she take his clothing? That's not what it is. And when the evidence comes out, this is going to be completely.
So couple things here. One, I want to put a comment up here. Boy says kidnapping, arson, prostitution. Individually, it's one thing. Put together creates a story. Problem is, Boy is, it all sounds really bad, but the question is, what was the intent behind each of those individual things? You say kidnapping. Well, what were the circumstances of the kidnapping? If kidnapping even happened at all, was this part of a domestic situation? Again, each of those three things have to be done in furtherance of the criminal enterprise, and have to be being willing to move forward financially the criminal enterprise in some way. And again, the kidnapping, the arson, the prostitution, maybe they did happen, and individually they should be prosecuted if there's evidence that meets those standards. But the issue in this case is they have to be proven to be linked together as part of furthering a conspiracy or a criminal conspiracy to commit crimes in order to gain benefit. And the benefit gained, of course, that the prosecution has in this case, they're claiming that these things are being done to benefit his criminal enterprise and to make Bad Boy Record, I guess, scare people and put them in a better position and intimidate people into doing deals with him, and et cetera, et cetera. The problem is that beyond a reasonable doubt, you really can't say beyond a reasonable doubt that it wasn't well, maybe it was for that reason, but could it also have just been, again, as this attorney is saying, he was in a 10-year, very volatile relationship, and that these things were just simply him being an abusive, terrible boyfriend, which he's going to embrace and can embrace, because if it was done for those reasons, then he's not guilty of RICO. Now, the two sex trafficking, or the two charges related to sex trafficking are going to be a little different, because, he doesn't require those to be done in furtherance of anything else. It's just a matter of, did he do them? Does the activity meet the standards that are required to be met in order for him to be found guilty? Now, in my opinion, I don't believe it does at all in any aspect of this case, from the standpoint of, I don't believe that the things that are laid out. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible that if they could get to the inner workings of this group, that they could maybe find some things going on. But I think that we're far away from that still. And if your only witness is going to be an ex-girlfriend to whom you had, to whom he had a very, very volatile relationship with, it's going to be a very difficult case to prove. Well, they hit now, Boy Black. You are correct. The same standard, somewhat of the same standard, was applied to R. Kelly, but here's the difference. In R. Kelly case, they actually had people inside R. Kelly's operation who were able to testify. And again, remember, he had several of the ladies flip on him, who came in and said that he put this together as a, as an operation. He was able to show that, remember, there was an underage component to the R. Kelly operation. So R. Kelly, P. Diddy, at least the structure of this indictment versus what R. Kelly was talking about, they were able to show that R. Kelly had a group of people whose sole purpose was to acquire underage women for him to have sex with. And as a result, to cover that up and to further that operation with the sole purpose of the criminal enterprise being to acquire underage women, it all emanated from that. So that was the strength of the R. Kelly case. And then, of course, they were able to bring in the case that they had where they had videotape of him with underage women. They were able to get women in who said, yes, I was with R. Kelly. He did this. I was underage when I was with him. And he essentially tricked me into coming into the enterprise, or into coming to him thinking, hey, he's going to make me a musician. What this attorney is telling us is this: the individuals, the two stars in this case, is Little Rod, a producer who claims to have seen the inner workings of Sean Combs' operations. And that's where they get all this information about freak offs and things of that nature. And then he has his girlfriend. And the activities and the things that were done were being done as part of a really toxic, volatile relationship. They were being done because he was upset with her because he thought she was cheating on him, or she thought he was cheating on her, and they were striking back at each other. And there is not a situation going on right now where they're saying, okay, P. Diddy has this group of women that he's cultivating and bringing around for purposes of trafficking them. R. Kelly's is totally different than what the Southern District has put together for P. Diddy. Can they use the drug mule they arrest as a witness? Well, the question is, again, can they link that guy to Diddy? Because you got to remember this. Diddy says, okay, Diddy says, all right, I want to get, some X, Y, Z. And somebody goes and acquires that for him. Now they've got to prove that Diddy knew that if he takes it and he gets it, okay, all he's doing is acquiring drugs for himself for personal use. Okay, that's not that's not distribution of drugs if it went to himself. They've got to actually prove again that Diddy was acquiring these drugs for the purpose of spreading it out and giving it to everybody else. Now he comes in and says, hey, this drug mule shows up and he says, hey, I'm going to be having a party. I'm going to have some friends there. There might be some people that are interested in your stuff. You show up, my man, and hook me up with whatever my supply is, and whatever you do, you do. They've got to prove the connection beyond a reasonable doubt that Diddy hooked up with this guy and that Diddy was getting some sort of financial benefit off of this guy's operations, and that he was not just a user of drugs. And they've got to actually have the hard proof, the stone cold hard proof, not assumptions. And again, the question is the drug mule going to testify against Diddy? If he isn't willing to testify against Diddy, they don't got anything. And if he can't say that he ever dealt with Diddy, if he says, well, I only dealt with Diddy's personal assistant, and Diddy's personal assistant isn't willing to come in and testify, they don't have enough evidence to link it back to Diddy. That's why what I'm saying is, I believe right now, the play in this case is that they are trying to acquire that evidence, and that they are in the stage that they're in right now is acquiring evidence. And that's what they're after in this case. Oh no, absolutely. Hey, listen, that's what I'm here for, boy. And I appreciate, you keep your questions coming. Any questions you have, I'm definitely willing to answer. A lot of people, I think, if you listen to the press, I mean, if you listen to even some of the knowledgeable legal scholars in this, they're caught up in the shock of, hey, Diddy's been arrested, and they're making the assumption that, hey, solely because the federal government has leveled a case against Diddy, it must be the strongest case in the world, and it's ironclad and it's airtight. And what I'm saying is, not always. A lot of times it is, but I think in this case, I think they were literally ran into a wall and they said to themselves, listen, we know we're going to have enough to take this to trial. And again, perhaps they can still win with the evidence that they have. They come in and they present it the right way. They get a jury in there and the jury says, hey, we're going to convict him. Boom. He's a bad guy. A lot of times the RICO cases come in. It's the culmination of evidence that they're able to put on during a case like this that would never come in. In other words, if they had to try each of these individual bad acts, the prior bad acts wouldn't be able to come in. In a RICO case, they can. So it makes it easier for the prosecutor to convict somebody just because the jury thinks they're a bad person. So, it's a weak case. But I think it's a case that they say, hey, we're willing to take a chance on this. But I think they're also hoping that when Diddy gets locked up, and he's locked up now, sitting in jail, and they can come to these people and say, listen, he's locked up. You want to keep him there? You want to keep him out? You're scared of him? You think he's a powerful guy? You help us, we'll help you, and it can become mutually beneficial. And if he gets convicted in a case like this, it helps those lawsuits. Well, I think that, I think that's a matter of lack of evidence right now at this point. I don't think that they would. I think if they had the goods on that, if they had the stuff, they would have added it. But I think to them, they didn't want to add something like that in. And then, cause a problem. Again, they can do a superseding indictment later on, or they can add it as an element if they get it. But I think they're far away from being able to tie him to something like the Tupac death. So I think they just, at this point, they want to keep it focused on what they think is their strongest points. And if he gets convicted, he's going to do a large amount. He's not going to do life. I would say he gets 20 years. I think that's a reasonable amount that he would get for something like this. But it's not about the prison time. It's about the forfeiture. And that's what's really significant in a case like this. That's what they're going after. They're going after the money. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. That's what this is all about. All right, let's continue listening to the defense attorney. This guy's sharp. I think he's going to do a really good job.
Different than the government's portrayed it.
But on this video, and I just want to show that again now, how do you defend against allegations that he hit, kicked, and dragged women when he's on video hitting, kicking, and dragging a woman?
Sure, he's not charged with hitting, kicking, and dragging a woman. He's charged with sex trafficking, and he didn't traffic anybody.
But he's charged with a conspiracy here where he was using physical abuse, emotional abuse, financial pressure, as prosecutors allege, to keep these women in his fold. Maybe just Cassie Ventura, but keeping these women in the fold.
Cassie Ventura lived by herself. She had her own house. She had a family. She had a career. And he was seeing another woman at the time. He wasn't around a lot. She could have done whatever she wanted to do. All of these allegations of, I was forced, I was coerced, I had to stay, are nonsense. And it's going to be proven to be so.
That video, in the indictment, it alleges that your client paid hotel staff $50,000 to make it disappear from the hotel surveillance system. Did he pay off the hotel staff?
Not that I know of. I know that's an allegation. I don't know that is true. What I was concerned about when I heard about this allegation is whether there was an allegation that there was some sort of law enforcement investigation pending, because then that would be a crime. But there was none. And so this is not a crime.
You said you're portraying this as adults who were at these events that wanted to be, I shouldn't even call them events. That's not certainly how anyone else would label it, but that they wanted to be.
So I want to make sure what he just said is understood, the distinction that he's making. Because what he's saying is this: the alleged bribery, okay, is it bribery if there isn't an investigation going on? Bribery only occurs if you're trying to avoid some sort of criminal action. And if he would have paid off these people to bribe them or bribe an official or affect a criminal case in some way, what he's saying is there was no crime being investigated at the time that these payments were made. What he was doing was he was paying these people off because he wanted to avoid the embarrassment in the press of people finding out about these things. So since the police were not involved at that moment, it doesn't count as bribery, which means it's not a crime that can be included as part of this alleged criminal enterprise that was being allegedly done to bring people in and bring women in and try to keep them there and drug them up and beat them up and keep them here for your own sexual gratification. That wasn't what happened here. This was purely a scenario where he's with a woman, he's not getting along with this woman, and as a result, embarrassing situation occurs. So he does what anybody with money does. He decides, I'm going to throw money at the situation, trying to make it go away, keep the press out of this thing, keep anybody from getting embarrassed. But it doesn't rise to the level of a crime. And that's the issue here. They're taking things that are part of a bad relationship that, hey, listen, absolutely a jackass. You don't have to have a pending case for what to happen, boy. What are you talking about? For bribery to happen, you absolutely have to have, there has to be a pending. Bribery is only a crime if you're paying someone to, if an investigation is already going on and you pay someone to avoid that, to affect that investigation. That's what the crime of bribery requires. If he's paying someone at the time because he wants them to not speak about this to the press, not pay for embarrassment, that's not bribery. And that's not a crime. That's simply saying, okay, I'm going to pay this money because I want to avoid the embarrassment. And that's what his attorney is saying. So, unfortunately, I mean, that's just the state of this thing. And again, I believe where the federal government is going with this case is that they are attempting to open the floodgates, so to speak, and that they hope that there's going to be others that are going to step forward and strengthen their case and make their case stronger. If that doesn't happen, it's going to be a very, very, very difficult case to prove when they get to court, which is why I'm interested to see if Diddy and his lawyers, and sometimes you see cases like this, one of the strategies is to draw it out and keep it going as long as my dad used to say. Hey, if the case is still pending, a conviction hasn't happened, especially if the guy gets out on bond. But in a case like this, the longer it goes on, the greater risk you have that somebody else comes in. And what you really want to do is get it before a jury if you think the case is weak and get that not guilty in and get double jeopardy attached. And then the case is over with. So we'll see what they do. We'll see what he does. It'll be interesting. Anyways, we'll get back to listening to our friend here. And we've got about 2 minutes left here.
There, but they also allege that they were recorded and essentially used as blackmail. Is that not true?
That's not true. That's not true.
How can you prove that when they have electronic evidence that, as they argue, over 90 cell phones, laptops, iCloud storage accounts, 30 electronic and storage devices, hard drives, thumb drives? Yeah. You're not worried about that?
No, because if they had it, they would have put it in the indictment. And it's not in the indictment.
When it comes to your client's credibility, I think people will look at what he said last fall. And it's not just his attorneys. I mean, he pays those attorneys. They're speaking on his behalf. They're the ones calling her claims baseless and ridiculous. And when you read the indictment today, they line up with what she alleged in that lawsuit last fall.
If the claim is that he had unwanted sex with her, that claim is baseless. And it will be proven to be baseless when we have a trial.
But the claim is obviously the conspiracy, the racketeering. It's much larger than just that, obviously, as you know.
It is, but the government wants it to be. But count 2, which is the sex trafficking count, relates to one person and one person alone. All of this talk of dozens of victims and 50 witnesses, if they had that, if they really had it, it would be in the indictment. It's not in the indictment.
So then why was he reaching out to so many of these people after it was clear this investigation was picking up steam?
So first of all, I don't think it's clear that he was reaching out.
Well, they said in the memo that he reached out to one person, I believe 48 times in 3 days.
So I think I know what you're talking about. There was a civil complainant who plays no role in the criminal case whatsoever, who brought a civil case against Mr. Combs. And she was in a band, and another one of the band members says, I was in the same band she was, and none of the things that she's complaining about in her complaint, I saw none of those things. And so she came forward and made a statement. She's not a witness. She's not a government witness.
But after 48 pieces of outreach, whether calls or text from your client.
I don't know that it's 48. And there's someone who had a business relationship, so it makes sense that Combs would speak to her. There's no allegation that this person was saying something false, so this person was somehow coerced into saying these things. And if you read the statement's actually quite soft and respectful. It's I respect that this person has this perspective. I was in the band at the same time. I never saw such things.
Is there any chance Sean Combs takes a plea deal?
I don't see it happening. I do not see it happening. He's innocent. I believe he's innocent. I believe he's innocent of the charges. And he is going to go to trial, and I believe he's going to win.
Mark Agniflo, thank you for...
So we want to know, right? Who's going to be watching Jesse and Delilah? Everybody down in front. Who's going to be watching?
All right, so there you have it. Words spoken from his attorney. And I think I want to get into a couple of things there that we heard. Uh, I thank you. Boy. That's exactly what I'm saying. And listen, I have read federal indictments. I have seen federal indictments. I have seen them many times. And I've like I said, I've been around the law. My dad been around his law firm, law practice. I've seen these things throughout the years, and this is by far one of the thinnest federal indictments I've ever seen. It's thin on facts. It's thin on details. And again, exactly what his attorney made a great point on. If they had these things allegedly that they had, they would have been detailed in the indictment. And that's why I think that, again, I anticipate that in the pretrial mode, at least, they're going to be challenging uh, this indictment. They're going to be challenging the validity of even being able to proceed because, again, you don't get to just list, as you saw there. I don't know if you were present when we read through the indictment, but um, there was no specifics about the crimes that were committed, and you don't get to charge. You don't get to, you don't get to the government doesn't get to charge vague, ambiguous charges. They have to have specifics. So they're going to file for a bill of particulars, in my opinion, I guess, is what could possibly be done here, and say, listen, we need specifics because you can't defend vague stuff. And 14th Amendment calls out, says you have a right to due process, and a right to due process means they have to tell you the date, the time, the place, and where it all occurred so you can defend it. You don't get to just stand up and say, well, it happened sometime over the course of this time. And if they take it to a jury like that, one of the defenses is going to be they can't do. When did it all happen? They can't specifically prove. I mean, maybe some of this stuff happened, but they don't have evidence that any of it specifically happened on a specific date at a specific time, which is what they're required. And I mean, I was shocked when it was only 14 to 16 pages. I expected this thing to be 100 pages. I mean, listen, that's typical in a case like this that's allegedly is sprawling. I mean, look at the civil complaint that Roddy or whatever that guy's name is, Rod Johnson or whatever his name was, or Rodney Jones. Civil. It was like I think it was close to 100 pages. And the federal government, the fruits of a year-long investigation, garners 16 pages and 3 counts. I'm telling you, I've never seen anything like it. This is not the government coming in a position of strength. I believe this was a play. This is a play. And they stood up and that prosecutor and again, we didn't watch the press conference, but if you watched it earlier today, maybe I should have put it on. I felt like the indictment was enough. But the prosecutor stands up and says, hey, we've got digital evidence and we've got all this phone stuff, and we've got stuff of videos that were taken that is proof that he was videotaping these people doing things at freak offs for the purpose of going in and extorting people. Where is it? Where's the specific victims? I mean, you're not going to necessarily get a victim's name, but you're going to get victim A, victim B, victim C, victim D. It's unbelievable. But again, remember, the federal government, they can indict a ham sandwich if they want to. This is one of those cases where I believe they've indicted a ham sandwich. Now, could it become a fantastic Las Vegas all-you-can-eat buffet? Maybe the Bacchanal buffet? Could it become that? Yes, it could. But it's going to take a lot of people stepping forward. And once they get the train rolling, okay, then they don't get to slow it down because Diddy has a right to a speedy trial, a fair trial, and he has a right to all these things. So they have to try the case on what they have right now. And again, what they have right now is enough for an indictment. What they have right now is the testimony of Cassie, the testimony of Rodney Jones. And then they, of course, I'm sure have other people they believe they can compel to testify, like housekeepers and people that witnessed or maybe saw certain things. So again, if you follow the Franklin Tucker case, that's a case where there's nothing in that case. They have no evidence against Franklin Tucker. Okay, they've got one guy who took a plea deal, took a hell of a sweet plea deal, and that is it. And what they've done is they've said, we're going to put this case on with this one witness, and we're going to bolster his testimony. The federal government can certainly put on a case like this. They're going to put on the two-star witnesses will be Rodney Jones and Cassie. And then the rest of the case will be building up that testimony that they have, building up the testimony to show that what they're saying is true. And doing it through bringing in people that are there, people that work there, people that interact. Unfortunately, boy, I really wish it would be televised, but I have not yet seen a federal trial that's televised. So it will not, I don't believe it will be televised. Now, maybe some sort of exception will get put in effect, but federal cases, I don't believe there's ever been a time that a federal case has ever been televised. And because this is a federal case, the answer to that question is I'm about 95% certain it will not be televised. I'd love it to be, because I'd cover that thing in a heartbeat. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be the case. So, yeah, that's where we stand. But I am going to, unfortunately, I've got to end this thing. We've been going for almost 2 hours now, 2.5 hours. This thing took a lot longer than I thought it would, but that's how these things always go. I wanted to get on. It's been a long, long time since I've sat down with you guys and broke down a case and broke down stuff. And I felt like, man, this is one we got to do it. So I appreciate you, boy. Thank you for the subscription. I hope to see you back in future lives. I'm certainly going to be covering Diddy. Check out the Franklin Tucker case if you haven't already heard about that. Got a playlist on here. It's a case that'll boggle your mind, and we're trying to fight hard on that case to get the truth out and bring attention to it. But we've got lots of other ones going on too. So welcome. Appreciate you. But with that said, guys, if there's no other questions, then I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing up, call it a night. And until we talk again, guys, let justice prevail.
The system's rigged, man, it's time to break free. Eyes wide open, gotta see what I see. Standing on the front lines, fighting for the truth. Lift the veil of lies, it's time to be the proof. Take a stand, don't you back down. Raise your voice, let's shake the town. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking chains, yeah, we're ready for war. With the power of the people, we'll make them see a world of justice, united and free. United and free. United and free. Marching with a purpose, we're taking it higher. Fighting through the struggle, igniting the fire. No more silence, we'll make the noise loud. Together in this battle, standing strong and proud. Injustice fades when courage aligns. Rise up together, break the confines. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking chains, yeah, we're ready for war. With the power of the people, we'll make them see a world of justice, united and free. United and free. United and free. So rise up now, it's our time to shine. Together we'll write a new paradigm. You paradigm. Whoa.